All right, welcome everyone to the SPR Zoom webinar today, focusing on pro tips for preparing and submitting manuscripts. My name is Shane Jimerson, and I am the editor-elect of School Psych Review. And essentially today we're going to share some key information, hopefully provide some good resources for you, and hopefully this will be helpful in your journey. It looks like right now we already have over 100 participants on, and as you can see, there's an opportunity in the chat to share questions. We'll make sure there's time for questions and answers. Ryan Farmer and Jamie Flowers will both be helping to monitor the questions that are popping up in there. About midway through, we'll pause. There's a slide that will give us a moment to see if there's questions to address. And then at the end, we'll also have time for questions and answers. So those of you who are active on social media, such as Twitter or Facebook, or we're going to also be on Instagram here soon. We encourage you to follow the School Psych Review, Twitter, as well as Facebook, and soon to be Instagram. And if you're out there on social media and you have an opportunity to post information about this session or share information, we certainly encourage that. Any screenshots are welcome. We're going to be recording this so that it can be posted and made available for students and faculty and others to access beyond this. And this is really part of our ongoing efforts with School Psych Review to further help develop and build the SPR community and facilitate knowledge and development of skills that will help each of us to advance science and practice and policy, particularly as related to the field of school psychology. So, with that, I can go ahead and end that first poll. It looks like about 90 folks might have already filled that out. And then I can share the results here. So hopefully you can see that on your screen, Bobby. Yeah. So basically what you can see here is that in terms of current position, about 50% are students, about 35% are faculty, so the vast majority students and faculty. We do have a few practitioners on, administrator, and a couple of others. In terms of number of articles submitted among those who are participating, about half, 44%, have not yet submitted a journal article. So that's great. It's an opportunity to learn and build some skills and get thinking, get oriented and thinking about some of the key considerations. And then of course, 1 to 2 articles, we have 31%, 3 to 5, 11%, and 11 to 26% there. And then 20 plus, we have 5 colleagues on who have already submitted 20 plus manuscripts. And then finally, the third question was, what's the most important factor in selecting where to submit your paper? And what we can see here is the vast majority have indicated the fit with the journal. So 84% are indicating the fit with the journal. And then in terms of distribution of the journal, no one endorsing that. Impact factor of the journal, we had 10%. And then reviews that are timely and quality, we had 6%. So hopefully that gets us oriented, gives us a sense of who's participating, and helps us to begin to basically think about the context that we're going to be discussing here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and tap this once. Hopefully we'll take just a moment to go to the next slide, give you a sense of what's included. Okay. Okay, so this is our agenda, and let me go ahead and make this one. Yep. This is our agenda for today. We're going to review 10 pro tips, and largely this is based on my own experiences as an author, as an editor, as an associate editor over the past roughly 25 years, and also utilizing information and input from colleagues who are also serving on the leadership team of SPR, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. And then there'll also be an opportunity for questions and answers. Okay, so let me go ahead, tap that once. Okay, so with that, I wanted to begin by highlighting that beginning on Monday, I had shared a Twitter post regarding what factors are most important in choosing where to submit, with the same 3 response options that each of you had an option to provide this morning at the beginning. one of the colleagues who responded, Anissa Goforth, just wanted to share, she had highlighted that every manuscript has a home and it's about finding it. And that's a really great disposition. That's how she mentors her students and colleagues that she works with. And so as you can see, as I sent out the note, there's been even more responses now, but I had copy pasted, did a screenshot there. You can see that in some ways the fit with the journal was very similar to the response among participants with 76% roughly. The distribution was not an area that was focused on. And then the impact factor of the journal was like around 6%. And then review timeline and quality, at that point, there were about 17, 18% who indicated that. So as indicated by each of you and as indicated in the recent Twitter poll, the fit with the journal is a key consideration, and I'm going to be presenting some information as related to that amidst the pro tips that I'll be discussing today. Okay, so we'll go to the next here. So pro tip number one, to start with, know who publishes the journal that you're submitting to. It makes a difference. It matters in terms of the audience, in terms of the infrastructure. And so I wanted to, for each of these pro tip questions, I'm going to also provide the information for School Psych Review Journal. So as most of you are aware, the National Association of School Psychologists publishes the School Psychology Review Journal, which it has for 40 years now. And recently, NASP has engaged in a partnership with the publisher, Routledge, Taylor and Francis, to publish and provide the infrastructure for publication and dissemination and distribution of School Psychology Review. So some of you folks know the NASP executive director, Kathy Minke. Some of you folks met Tony Dimitri, the managing editor at Taylor and Francis, when we were doing our special session at the NASP conference in February. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Amy Reshley, who's been the editor of the journal School Psych Review since 2016 and through this year. And then myself as the incoming editor-elect, we will be, the leadership team that I've put together and collaborating with will be managing manuscripts beginning next month and then continuing on through July, through August, September, the rest of the year, and for the next 5 years. So in terms of the pro tip number one, who publishes the journal? Now you have that information, but you definitely want to be thinking about that with other journals as you're considering preparing and submitting manuscripts. Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so with pro tip number two, should be appearing. Yeah. Okay. Pro tip number two is to know the leadership team of the journal that you're submitting to. So for each of the journals online, you can look at the editorial board. You can look at who the action editors, associate editors, senior editors are, basically looking to understand who that leadership team is. So I briefly wanted to walk you through the SPR leadership team. This is the incoming team, myself included. We've also got Frank Worrell over at the University of California at Berkeley as a senior editor. We've got Tyler Renshaw up at Utah State University coming in as an associate editor. We've got Sam Song down at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, also incoming as an associate editor. We've got Amanda Sullivan up at the University of Minnesota, who's also a senior editor. We've got Francis Wong over at University of Missouri, who is an incoming associate editor as well. Also, Jamelia Blake down at Texas A&M. She's another incoming senior editor. We've got Jorge Gonzalez coming in as from the University of Houston, also serving as a senior editor. Gary Canave up at Eastern Illinois University, coming in as a senior editor. Then we got Dorothy Espelage there. She's at the University of North Carolina, and she's coming in as a senior editor. We've got Scott Graves up at Ohio State University. He's coming in as associate editor. Purna Arora up at the Teachers College at Columbia University, coming in as associate editor. And then Shizhen Wang, who's coming in as an associate editor, who's at the University of Maryland. And then Stacey Ann January, who's at the University of South Florida, also coming in and actually continuing as an associate editor, as she has been working with School Psych Review the past couple of years. So again, this is important to point out, to recognize. Pro tip number 2 is know the leadership team, and that helps you to start to get a sense of what the different roles, what the different responsibilities, what the backgrounds, what the areas of scholarship are among these individuals. Hopefully, as you look at this particular leadership team, you'll recognize a few things. One is that there's a tremendous diversity of scholarly expertise and emphases. There's a variety of methodological expertise and strengths represented. There's also interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary individuals represented across the leadership team members. So again, if you take a look at the leadership team, you can sort of begin to glean where that journal is focusing some of their energy, what sorts of expertise they have. And again, you can also look even further into the editorial board members and such. So with pro tip number 2, know the leadership team, and now you've been introduced to the School Psych Review leadership team. All right, let me go ahead to the next one. So pro tip number 3, know the focus of the journal, okay? So many of the journals, when you go into their websites online, they'll identify a brief statement that highlights the key foci of the journal. Okay, so for School Psych Review, for instance, School Psych Review presents important conceptual developments and empirical findings from a wide range of disciplines: educational, child clinical, pediatric, community and family psychology, as well as education and special education, and communicates advances from within school psychology to the broader educational and psychological communities. So again, this is important to recognize the breadth that's illustrated here, the multidisciplinary emphasis, welcoming submissions from authors across diverse fields, and really trying to help each of us understand as authors and potential individuals who will be submitting manuscripts as to what the focus of the journal is. Down at the bottom of this slide, you can also see that back in the day, in the early 1970s, when it first was launched, it was called the School Psychology Digest. And then in 1979, the last phase where it was School Psychology Digest, then it switched to School Psych Review since 1980. And you can see a few of those images of the journal cover since that time. Okay, so that's pro tip number 3. Know the focus of the journal, very important. And you'll usually get that information online. A little bit more about the focus of the journal as related to School Psychology Review. Many of you are familiar with the model for psychological or for services by school psychologists, the 10 domains. And this is to highlight that there's a breadth of knowledge that is very important to support students, teachers, and families. And when you look at the breadth of that, we'd be looking for manuscripts, for instance, with School Psychology Review within each of these 10 areas of the model services. Let me see, I think it'll list one more here. When you go and submit your manuscript, there'll be a lot of specific classification categories. It's not important that you can read every single one of these, but what's important for you to realize is there's probably about over 130 of these subcategories. Some of those that you can see up there might be ADHD, assessment, behavior, assessment, attention, assessment, neuropsychology, crisis intervention, depression, dropout, factor analysis, family school collaboration, progress monitoring, professional issues, social justice. You can see a lot of these. The point is that when you submit your manuscript to most journals, they're going to have you identify those classification areas. So I just wanted to provide you with a glimpse of what some of those are for School Psychology Review. Okay, so I'll go to the next pro tip here. So did we skip number 4? Yeah, I think it did. Hold on. Apologies, I've got this slight delay. Okay, pro tip number 4, know who can access the journal. So when you're submitting a manuscript to a journal, you want to consider who can access the journal, because partially that's the audience, but also that's who's going to be able to benefit from the information that you are publishing in that particular journal. So there's a tremendous opportunity to bring science to practice with School Psychology Review in particular, because School Psychology Review is distributed directly to over 20,000 school psychologists, over 1,000 graduate educators, over 1,000 graduate students in school psychology, over 1,000 leaders at the national and state level in school psychology. Plus, of course, you have the institutional library subscriptions that Taylor and Francis works to help facilitate that. So many of you can also access this through your institutional library subscription. And then also we'll be featuring the content that's published in School Psych Review in the NAS Communique to help further advance bringing this science to practice. Now, finally, we're also working and collaborating with NASP and Taylor and Francis, as well as the School Psych Review social media team, in order to feature the content that's published in School Psych Review across multiple platforms. So again, it's important to note that as you look at each journal that you're thinking about submitting to, part of it is you want to get your research paper published in that journal, right? But to what end? And really what you're looking for is to identify who's going to be able to access that article. How much is that journal or the association or the infrastructure going to help promote access to your article and that sort of thing? So these are important considerations on the front end as you're thinking about preparing and then submitting your manuscript. So pro tip number 5, know the journal commitments. Okay, usually you can glean that from the editor's statements. Sometimes you need to look into the introduction editorials within the journal. Those are both good sources. Usually on the journal website, you'll be able to find an editor's statement that will hopefully clearly articulate and outline the commitments of the journal. So I wanted to walk through 4 of the core SPR commitments. So the first is advancing high quality and timely reviews. And to do that, we've identified over 150 colleagues who are committed to providing high quality and timely reviews. By high quality, I'll tell you that we've already done peer reviewer development webinars and provided them with resources. Many of them are completing the Nature Masterclass on peer review. And if you're interested in this, you can look at the other video the webinar that we did a few weeks ago. So high quality is tremendously important, providing constructive, meaningful feedback to authors, but also timely. And what do we mean by timely? In this instance, we mean within the School Psych Review context that we are committed to providing a decision letter within a month, 30 days of submission of the manuscript to School Psych Review. And this is important that each of the members of the editorial board have committed to this. They have identified that they will be completing their reviews within a 2-week period, which means that the time on the front end to get the manuscript prepared and have action editors go through it, and then the time on the back end of making sense of the recommendations and crafting the decision letter and providing information from the reviews, that can all happen within a 30-day period. Now, if you look at this with other journals, a lot of journals are above that, more closer to 90 days or 120 days. So that's, 3 or 4 months, but our commitment is to high quality, timely reviews within the SPR context. So as an author, you want to think about what are these core commitments. Also, in terms of advancing science that informs practice and policy, as a commitment, that's going to be important for you as an author to consider, 1, how you're going to structure the content of your manuscript, of your paper, but also 2, whether this is the right place for you to publish your paper, because if you're wanting to influence practice, influence policy, bring that science to have a practical influence, then it might be a good fit for SPR. So this emphasis on advancing science and informing practice and policy clearly has implications for the way that you would develop your discussion section, for instance, because if there's particular information and insights for practice or policy, you're going to want to clearly articulate this information in your discussion section. Okay, the third core commitment for SPR is expanding distribution and impact. And so, as we mentioned, NASP had historically been solely responsible for the publication and distribution of School Psych Review. But clearly, within the contemporary context of all of the library, institutional subscriptions and distribution and all of this, it sort of comes beyond the scope of the NASP office infrastructure, which is quite small, incredibly talented, and great colleagues, but it's a small staff infrastructure. So with this new partnership with Taylor and Francis, this is opening up the door for tremendous distribution and dissemination. So I wanted to highlight that as SPR is committed to expanding distribution and impact, including bringing this information to influence science and practice and policy. Okay, the fourth core commitment is advancing the diversification of school psychology to contribute to the future of school psych review and to the future of school psychology. And this is an important component for numerous reasons that we need to have the science to address and inform our practice in working with diverse children. For instance, there's increasing diversity throughout the United States. Here's an illustration of the county level change in diversity since 2000. You can see that those areas that have had low diversity but big increase, those are sort of the greenish and brownish colors here. Lots of the country falls into that category. Those areas that have high diversity, big increase here. And then low diversity, little change are the few dark areas, darker green on my screen. And then high diversity, little change, there's many areas that already previously had high diversity as of 2000. So this is looking at population demographics in the United States. And it really reflects that this, for us within School Psych Review, warrants further emphasis on science that's involving and addressing diverse children, families, schools, and communities. So we've identified this as a particularly important area and important for us in the field of school psychology, for faculty, for students, as well as practitioners providing the services to support children in the schools. Here's another slide to just further illustrate the increasing diversity throughout the United States. This national graphic just simply highlights where race and ethnic minority groups are highly represented by county. So this is county by county throughout the US. You can see that those that are showing up in dark green, those are counties where Hispanics are highly represented minority groups. Those that are showing up in orange, these are counties where Blacks are highly represented minority groups. And then the dark blue, for instance, are Asians, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders. You can see a few regions in the US. And then also the American Indians and Alaska Natives, you can see with the lighter blue. And then of course, 2 or more minorities being highly represented in the lighter green. Again, the point is this warrants further emphasis on science involving as well as addressing diverse children, families, schools, and communities. So we intend to be featuring scholarship that will make tremendous advances in these areas within School Psych Review. And that's why we keep highlighting Be the Change. One of our default hashtags is SPR, Be the Change. And you can see that that's reflected in our leadership team. It's reflected in our commitments. And we're encouraging each of you to consider submitting your research to School Psych Review that will help us to further understand, advance support services, advance practices, ultimately advance science, practice, and policy related to supporting all children and families in the United States. So this is a chance to keep calm and check in. I will briefly put up, the poll for pace and understanding. Those of you who have questions can type it in there. And let me launch this poll real quick. So we'll just take a breather just for a moment. You can fill out the poll. Pace and understanding, just trying to get a sense of how things are going. And Ryan, while folks are filling that in, are there particular questions that you wanted to note at this moment, or do you want to save them till the end? You let me know.
Well, the only question so far seems to be the source of the diversity figures you presented.
Okay. I'll have to, I know I have it on my notes in the slide deck, but I'll have to forward that information. Yeah. And that's been featured here recently. I believe those data were from 2017, as I recall. I believe the Washington Post might have been the one to actually compile the graphics, but I could be wrong on that. But I will be able to share that. We'll blast that out via, we'll put some social media, we'll put out that image and the links, okay? Thanks, Ryan. So as we are right now, 90% say we're going just right. And in terms of understanding, 90% say very clear. All right, so we're on the right path. All right, let me go ahead and I will agree that my clicks of getting to advanced slides are too slow. I would like it to go instantly, but here we are. Pro tip number 6, know how to submit to the journal. Okay, now this seems like a simple thing, but in the contemporary context of using the internet in order to submit journals, it can be sometimes complex, as you'll discover, trying to figure out, once you decide which journal, how to actually submit the article to the journal. So what I've done here is I've given you the HTTP link, which is taylorandfrancisonline.com, and then it's USPR. Taylor and Francis places a U at the beginning of all of their journal acronyms. So it's not meant to be special for like US or something. It's meant to be SPR, but they just use that U indicator for all of their journals. So Taylor, tnfonline.com/USPR. And when you do that, this is what you'll get. You'll get this particular screen right here. And I just wanted to point out that there's a simple button where you can click submit an article, okay? And again, that's the portal. You're going to need to have your manuscript materials prepared in a way, for instance, being blinded so that the author's information is not on the title page, for instance. There's little details to attend to, such that when you upload each of the pieces, so the abstract, impact statement, the text of the article, tables, figures, when you upload it into the portal system, it will guide you through that process. And some journal portals are asking you to do those individually. Some of those are having you do it as one article or one file. Again, you'll need to make sure it's blinded. That's a key component across all of them, because in the peer review process, it's double blinded in the sense that you won't know who the reviewers are. The reviewers won't know who you are. And the advantage here is that we hopefully will reduce bias and sort of favoritism and these types of things. Okay, so that's how you get to the submit a journal article. That's a pro tip number 6, and you can check that out for any journal online. Search for their submission portal. But also, before you just go ahead and submit that article, you're going to want to know the author guidelines. So pro tip number 7 is to be able to focus on what are the author guidelines? What are the instructions for authors? So I really encourage you to go into the journal's website, their portal, and look for directions for authors, because these instructions for authors will often be largely similar across the journals, but you'll notice there'll be some variations. So for instance, the length of the abstract. Some journals will restrict that to 150 words. Some will restrict it to 200 words. Some may restrict it to 250 words. Whatever it is, the point is that you ought to know this before you submit, so that you're being consistent with the format of what's expected within that particular journal. You can also see, like in the instructions for authors, Taylor and Francis and many of the publishing groups, you can see this author services for general guidance on every stage of the publication process. Once you get into like the portal, and I encourage you to do this with School Psych Review or other journals, is go in there and take advantage of their author services, because they'll walk you through key considerations for the abstract, key considerations for the impact statement, key considerations for the introduction, key considerations for the methods section, for the results, for the discussion, for the tables, for the figures. So I really do encourage you to take advantage of the instructions for authors. You really do need to know the author guidelines, but also you have a lot of opportunity to learn information in general, especially since about 50% of the participants had not yet submitted a journal article. These types of information and resources can be very valuable. Okay, So pro tip number 8, know the types of articles that are welcome. So not all journals accept all types of articles, okay? So this is important to start with, to highlight. I'll, for instance, highlight what School Psych Review welcomes. So for original research is given top priority, and those quantitative research articles, those qualitative research articles, single subject case design, mixed methods, also meta-analyses, certainly all of that would be welcome as original research and given top priority. Also, given that it's a school psych review, school psychology review, we also do welcome systematic reviews that provide important contributions to advanced science, practice, and/or policy. There are specific guidelines out there that I would encourage you to seek out in order to develop systematic reviews, because there's a very rigorous process that certain organizations and such have outlined. You can find some of these resources on the School Psych Review website. You can also email us to get more information. But if you do decide to engage in a systematic review, we do encourage you to look at those rigorous guidelines for preparing manuscript that's really going to be hopefully well received. Okay, so the other thing that I will mention is that School Psych Review and some of the other journals, they do accept research briefs, which are shorter summaries of your research or scholarship that helps to get information out that might be not quite as fully complete, like in terms of relative to a systematic, large scale longitudinal randomized control design study. You might not have something that's quite so flushed out, but if you have something that you believe would make a contribution to advanced science, practice, or policy, you might also consider the research briefs portion as an outlet. Again, School Psychology Review does accept those as submissions, and some of the other journals do as well. Okay, so that's pro tip number 8, know the types of articles that are welcome. Now, pro tip number 9 is to encourage you to attend to the special topic foci of any particular journal that you're considering to prepare and submit your manuscript to. Now, here on this slide, I'm highlighting that School Psychology Review has an open call process for all special topic foci that we have. And I wanted to note that, so all scholars are encouraged to submit manuscripts for upcoming special topic sections. And our intent with special topic sections is to identify especially important topics that warrant further emphasis as the next frontiers in school psychology research and practice and policy, and really address these critical issues in the field, really intending to advance practice, research, as well as policy. So I just wanted to note that right now we already have 5 that are featured up there. This is the link for, if you typed in School Psych Review special topic submissions, you'd find this on the NASP website. But, and then you can download the details for each of these. And so, for instance, school violence and school safety is one. We did a webinar on that last week, Matthew Mayer, Amanda Nickerson, and I, highlighting. This one is the soonest due date, so submissions between June 1st and June 15th that are focused on school violence and school safety. And then we also have a special topic section coming up in July focused on COVID-19 and school psychology, so adaptations and new directions for the field. Those manuscripts are due July 15th, okay, by July 15th there. And then also reconceptualizing school psychology for the 21st century, the future of school psychology. And that's due in August. Again, I forgot to mention, this is going to be Amanda Sullivan as well as Frank Worrell as the guest editors here. Sam Song, she's in Wang, Dorothy Espelage, and colleagues are each doing the COVID-19 Pam Fleming as well. And then addressing youth suicide through prevention, intervention, and postvention. That's a special topic that will be due in November, right? And then also theory, methods, and practice to advance equity in school psychology. Those are due January 21st. It should be 2021. My apologies for not updating that. The website needed to be updated, and I'd copied and pasted there. But that'll be January 21 of 2021. So with that, each of the journals, you've got to take a look at it to see if their special issues are open for general submission. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a group of select articles that you're not allowed to submit for. But with School Psych Review, every special topic that we're going to be featuring for the next 5 years, you'll also have an opportunity to submit your best scholarship if you're doing great work in these spaces that you can submit for peer review. And if it's favorably reviewed and ultimately accepted for publication, then it would be featured with other articles within, within School Psych Review. The other point I would make about special topic foci, this is really a pro tip consideration, that if a journal is identifying a special topic as important for the journal, even if you're not able to get your paper submitted by the due date of when that special topic section specifies their deadline, what's important for you to realize is that you could still go ahead and submit your manuscript anytime, because if the journal is interested in that content, it wouldn't be necessarily featured in the special topic section, but it could be featured as a general article. So I really do strongly encourage each of you to consider what those special issues, those special topic sections that are featured are. And again, just to remind you that I know that this one at the bottom is supposed to be 2021, but all the rest, these are coming up over the next 4 or 5 months. So all of these are within, say, the next 6 months in School Psych Review. And you'll see that we're going to be posting more. We have several more that are currently under development, and those will be due in 2021 as well. Okay. So that's pro tip number 9 in terms of attending to the special topic foci.
I have a couple questions.
Okay, should I do it now or should I, we're just about to the end.
Okay, then keep going.
Okay.
We'll just wait.
Okay, perfect. So pro tip number 10, clearly state the contributions of the paper. Very important. Within any paper that you write, you want to make it clearly obvious what the contributions of your paper are. And again, within the School Psych Review context, what are the contributions of your paper to advance science? What are the contributions of your paper to advance policy? What are the contributions of your paper to advance practice? Again, it may not advance all 3 of those, so don't try to stretch, right? And certainly the policy one can sometimes be the most challenging for much of our research. But certainly make it clear what the contributions are minimally for the science and the practice, and all the better if also the policy. So I want to highlight that as pro tip number 10. With School Psych Review, it's actually now going to be required that you include an impact statement. The impact statement will be 2 to 3 sentences that briefly describe these important contributions to science, to practice, and/or policy. And that impact statement will help to front load it, but make certain that you're also putting this information into your discussion sections, your conclusions and such in your papers. Okay, so that's an important pro tip number 10 is clearly state the contributions of your paper so that the editors, the action editors, the reviewers, they all get it. They understand it. Be explicit. And then the bonus beyond the pro tip, the 10 pro tips is prior to submitting the paper, it's important to carefully copy edit and attend to the APA style formatting, right? When reviewers review manuscripts that have a lot of typos, that haven't attended to APA format, it casts sort of a negative perception overall of the quality of the paper. Now, again, these are things that could be taken care of and fixed ultimately and revised, but it's better for you to attend to this and carefully copy edit your paper before submitting and make certain that you've attended to the APA style formatting. Okay, so those are the 10, right? You want to know who publishes the journal. You want to focus. You want to know what the focus of the journal is. You want to know who the journal leadership team is. You want to know who can access the journal. You also want to know the commitments of the journal. You want to know how to submit to the journal. You want to know the author guidelines. You want to know what types of articles are welcome. And you want to attend to the special topics foci of the journal. Then also clearly state the contributions of the paper. And as I noted, carefully copy edit the paper prior to submission, attending to those APA style guidelines. Okay, so that's it in summary. And now I believe we had a few questions there, and I believe this will go to the next slide. Those of you that are active on social media, please do, post and get involved, and make sure you're following Twitter School Psych Review, the Facebook School Psych Review. And Jamie, you said there were a couple questions that we would be able to field there.
Yeah. The first is, does SPR prioritize research from the United States?
That's a great question. And certainly that's another element of looking at the goodness of fit, all right? I've done a lot of work internationally myself, so I certainly think about this a lot when looking for the right outlets for my scholarship and the collaborative scholarship I do with colleagues. And I would say that School Psychology Review does mostly focus on the practice and policy related to school psychology in the United States primarily. However, the caveat is that depending upon the nature of the research, depending upon the nature of the topic, depending upon the potential contributions, School Psychology Review could be a good fit for research that's done within an international context. And I'll give you an example of this. Increasingly, there are transnational scholarly initiatives where data is being collected in multiple countries. Measures are being developed, not just taking something from the US and plugging it into other cultures or countries or contexts, but rather developing measures authentically to be used within the international context. And when they take on important issues, such as some of the ones that come to mind are student engagement, for instance. I know there was a big multinational project on that. School climate, for instance, is another one where we've got several colleagues who are doing multi-country research in that regard. If the contribution is going to advance science practice in school psychology that would be particularly related to children, families, and schools ultimately in the United States, given that it's published by the National Association of School Psychologists, this would certainly be optimal. And you can see where there are some studies of certain populations that might lend themselves more to another journal versus School Psych Review. But if you have an interest in featuring your international scholarship and you have a question about it, you can always feel free just to email me. I think my email is, well, it was somewhere on here, but again, just jimerson@ucsb.edu. So that's a great question, and hopefully that information is helpful. Yeah.
I'm from Indonesia, and can I publish in School Psych Review?
So again, I think the previous response basically answers that question, that we intend to be inclusive of scholarship and colleagues, and we definitely want to help facilitate you publishing your information. Sometimes it might be in School Psych Review, sometimes it might be in other journals. So hopefully that helps to appreciate and understand that piece. Yeah.
Our studies about early intervention welcome in School Psych Review?
Absolutely, yes. We have several leaders on our leadership team that specifically focus on early intervention, as well as many members of our editorial board. And so we certainly would encourage prevention, early intervention throughout the scope. Absolutely. I also will note that I posted the last poll there just to get a sense of whether this has been helpful, whether you feel like you're more knowledgeable now. So you can fill that out. What other questions do we have, Jamie?
So the diversity being discussed seem to be referring to race and ethnicity. Does SPR have an interest in furthering knowledge and working with LGBTQ youth?
Yeah, absolutely. And we take a broad definition of diversity for certain. If you look closely at the introduction article that's posted on the School Psych Review website through NASP, where it's articulating the vision that myself and the leadership team have for School Psych Review over the next 5 years, we specifically include a very broad definition of diversity, not limited to ethnicity, race, culture, LGBTQ, or others. We have an expansive definition of diversity in there, and you should take a look at that. But the short answer is yes, and the more detailed response is that there's tremendous amount of diversity that we need further research, further knowledge, further science to advance our practices and our policies within the school. So absolutely, we welcome the breadth of diversity research within school psych review.
And then this one, I mean, the team might need to discuss this one a little bit, but will there be certificates for participants? And I guess whoever asked that, I would ask maybe what would you need it? We probably need information what they needed it for a little bit more, if that was gonna be.
That's a good point. Presently, we don't have that infrastructure in place, but as Jamie mentioned, there's an opportunity for us, obviously, to try to figure out what that might look like and how we can be able to generate those types of things.
And then someone just wanted to make sure that when you're having a special edition, you'll also take general research articles at that time.
That's right. Yeah, that's an excellent point that I should have made clear. Thanks for the question. That essentially when a journal puts out a call for special topics or special issues, it doesn't mean that there's a moratorium on the submission of general articles. Absolutely not. Because here's the thing, when a special topic section is published, that special topic section will feature the articles that met the mark and were favorably peer reviewed, right? So that could mean that there's 3 articles. It could mean that there's 10 articles. It could mean that there's 15 articles. There's a wide range. But the point is that we're also going to have general articles always. It will be rare that an issue of School Psych Review would only feature exclusively the special topics section. It would generally have other general articles as well. So I love that question. Very important point. Thanks for asking it. And just to remind you, that's true of most journals, with the exception of those that do special issues where they're exclusive and they do not include other submissions. That generally they also still accept general articles, but they don't necessarily publish general articles in their special issues. So that's a great question. You can always submit general articles to School Psych Review, and as of July, this incoming leadership team will be responsible for managing these manuscripts for the next 5 years. Great question.
We have 2 related questions as well. First, when you're submitting a an issue for a special topic, how do you indicate that in the portal?
Excellent question. So there's a cover letter. As an author, when you're submitting your manuscript, you need to craft a cover letter that clearly articulates that what you're submitting the manuscript for. So in the instance of a special topic call, you'll put that in your cover letter. And then as that manuscript is processed and checked in, the administrative check-in process, it will be tagged with that designation such that then it will be directed to the guest editors who are responsible for the special topic section. And you know what? Great question bringing up the topic of where do you specify this? Because in your cover letter, I should have also noted that's an important space to articulate the contributions, clearly articulate the contributions. Generally, each journal asks you to identify that, that this is unique content, that it hasn't been published before, that you followed the appropriate human subjects guidelines. Usually there's basic information that does need to be included in that cover letter. But the answer to your question is, 1, definitely include that information about this is being submitted to the special topics section in there. And then 2, also be certain to highlight the contributions of your manuscript. And hey, another key tip, if that journal has published other articles that are related to your article, then go ahead and mention that in your cover letter too. In the future, I should add this one as a separate slide. Great question.
As a follow-up to that, does the application portal permit a manuscript to be considered, would the team permit a manuscript to be considered for a special topic and general submission simultaneously, or are these completely separate processes?
Great question. Great question. So basically, in terms of how it would be processed, it would only be processed once, not twice. But I will tell you this, if it appears through the process that it's not a good fit with the special topics section, but it might actually be a good fit as a general article, then it's the case that the guest editors would communicate this with me, or I might have already identified that myself before even assigning it to a guest editor. And if a guest editor says, this is not a good fit and we should reject the manuscript, but it might be a good fit for the general article top area, then we can reprocess that. We can process it in the other channel. We can assign it to other action editors, not necessarily the guest editors. Now, some of them will just not be a good fit overall. And hopefully the best case scenario for authors is that you get this feedback and you get this information promptly and politely and constructively, such that you can then put your energy into looking for alternative outlets that would be a better fit. Again, this goodness of fit being so important. So hopefully that's helpful.
I have one more. Do authors have to be connected to a university to publish? Is there space for practitioners in school settings to share research?
Great question. Absolutely. And if you are a practitioner out there and you would like to publish your research, certainly School Psych Review is going to embrace each individual contribution for the content that it is. You do not need an affiliation with a university. You don't need to be a professor. You don't need to be a student. You don't need to be, it's open to all. You could be an administrator, a school psychologist, practitioner, special education teacher, anyone who has the will and the data and essentially wants to make that contribution. If you can prepare it in a format that's going to be compelling and convincing, and as it goes through that peer review process, again, favorably reviewed such that peers who are blinded to who you are as an author are making the recommendation that this manuscript be published in the journal. And again, just to be clear, oftentimes there's multiple phases, multiple iterations of revisions that ultimately help to make it clear whether it's a good fit or not a good fit. So again, especially for first-time authors, if you get a revise and resubmit, that's really great because that's the pathway towards ultimately completing the revisions to get the manuscript revised and ultimately published. So absolutely, all contributors are welcome, and just focus on preparing that high quality manuscript that will be favorably reviewed. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Yep.
Is SPR committed to APA 7th edition as of now?
Yeah, so it's always best to go with the most contemporary version. So go ahead and push forward. We'll continue to update as the APA style formats are updating and such. So yeah.
And I got another one.
Okay, great.
Do you recommend any books on preparing and submitting manuscripts for journals, something for first-time authors?
Definitely, there are some good resources out there. I know that our colleague in school psychology, Randy Floyd, had developed a edited book that does include many of the journal authors, editors, as well as contributors that has these sorts of chapters. So if you looked up the Randy Floyd, it looks like Ryan might have already featured that in the chat, the publishing school psychology related fields. That could be a great contemporary resource to help provide further information and guidance. There's a lot online. And again, I'd also encourage you to check out the author services, for instance, of Taylor and Francis. And many of the publishers do have these author services, which they're basically helping to provide information about optimal content for, abstract intro methods, discussion and such. Yeah, great.
And one more, there's a couple more.
Okay.
So will SPR consider accepting survey studies?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. And that one gets complex across journals, so it's smart to ask. I believe within our context, I believe that many of the journals sort of veer away from the survey studies. But with School Psych Review, particularly being about the practice of school psychology, I anticipate that we will see we will see some high quality manuscripts that are survey oriented and that will provide us with some insights. Again, the key with doing those survey studies is really looking to articulate clearly how this advances our knowledge. How does it advance our science, or how does it advance our practice, or how does it advance a policy related? So when you do a survey study, and I've done many survey studies myself, again, they tend to be descriptive in nature, but again, to the degree that they provide unique insights that make advances, those are the types of survey studies I anticipate that would be the most likely to be favorably reviewed through that peer review process. Yeah.
And then does SPR ever publish manuscripts with null or minimal effects?
Well, that's a great question. When you say ever, that's like a test of my knowledge of the entire history of the journal. But I would say that if you can create the compelling and convincing rationale for why that's going to be essential, then it could potentially be favorably reviewed. My thought is that it is challenging for journals to publish all articles. There's limited space, and so to publish every article or every paper written that includes null findings, that would be untenable, right? But to the degree that you can articulate how this null finding is absolutely critically important and advances science, practice, or policy, I think that's the angle to go. But again, I think this is a struggle for all journals, given the limited space that we have within each of the journals, that it can't just publish all of the null findings. Yeah.
And that's it. That's all we got.
Okay, well then that's good timing because we're just about out of time. And I appreciate again Ryan Farmer, Jamie Flowers for all their help here. Obviously, Kirby Wyckoff, also part of our social media team. Each of the three of them have been amazing, and I appreciate their help today. Hopefully you're going to be active on the School Psych Review Twitter site, the School Psych Review Facebook site. Email us if you have questions, and we look forward to your future contributions to School Psychology Review. The final update for the poll is that overall we had about 3/4 of our participants indicating that this webinar was very helpful. Another about 20% saying kind of helpful, and that's fantastic. And when we asked, do you feel more knowledgeable about how to prepare and submit a journal article, 91% say yes. So this is fantastic. If you're among the other 9% that don't, feel free to email us, reach out to get more information. And thank you all for participating. We welcome you to be part of the SPR community, and we're looking forward to your further contributions to the field of school psychology. So thank you. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording here.